Greetings all, this is Hairy Nick, how you guys going? Welcome to the Hangar Bay, our new and revamped X-Wing list review series. In these videos we are going to take a look at some of the lists that you guys have submitted here on the channel or on the Facebook or on the Discord or anywhere, and discuss their impact, talk about the strategies behind them, talk about their validity in both meta and casual play. Now before we start this, I want to just do a bit of housekeeping. Just the other day we started a Patreon for the channel, and if you are a supporter of that and you have paid the prerequisite amount, it's all explained there on the Patreon website. You can be a part of the Discord for this channel, and on that Discord we discuss many things, but mostly the main reason I have that is so we can actually decide what to put on the channel. Part of that is deciding what list archetypes we talk about in these videos. Today's video on SCUM Droids is very much a part of that. We had a look at all the lists being submitted on Discord, and based on those submissions we decided what archetypes we're doing. Now, if you're not part of the Discord, you're not part of the Patreon, don't worry, you can still submit lists in the comment section down below here in text form. I'll still save them and use them, but at a minimum I will always be reviewing at least one patron's list per week. So without further ado, let's dive into this. And before we start on the list, let's have a bit of a primer, because today we're going to talk about droids, specifically on the SCUM faction. But droids overall have a unique mechanic in the game of X-Wing, and that is to do with this little token here, the Calculate token. Calculate, as described by the developers of X-Wing, is basically crappy focus. Whenever you have a focus token on your ship and you roll dice, if you have any amount of focus results on those dice, you can spend that focus token to change all of those to the prerequisite hit or evade, depending on what color dice you're rolling. If you have a Calculate token, you can spend that to change one of those results to the corresponding result. So on the face of it, it does seem like this is just a worse version. However, there is one caveat also. With focus tokens, you may only spend one during each dice roll. There's no real upside to being able to spend more if you could, but that's not an option. With Calculate tokens, you can spend more than one. So if you roll 2 focus results, for example, you could spend 2 tokens. And indeed, lots of the pilots and upgrade cards that give you access to Calculate tokens often do give you access to multiple ones. There's more sharing of them in general. And indeed, this is more prominent on the SCUM faction than any other faction. With one exception, we do have C3PO on the Rebel faction, which does give you access to 2 Calculate tokens whenever you take a Calculate action. That's basically the one exception to this rule. Any other effect like that is pretty much present on the SCUM faction, and will be pretty much until we get the Clone Wars era stuff revealed, because we're going to have the CIS faction in the game of X-Wing, who is going to be predominantly droids, and it's going to be interesting to see how we play around with this idea. But for the time being, let's talk about SCUM. And it is worth pointing out, the advantage that a focus token gives you over a Calculate token most of the time is not really prevalent. If you're just rolling 2 or 3 dice, which most ships do on their attack or defense, you're probably not going to see multiple focus results. And therefore, focus is not necessarily a huge advantage over taking Calculate. There are several effects that give you 2 Calculate tokens, and despite the fact that they don't convert as many dice as your regular focus tokens, in general, mathematically speaking, it is slightly better to have 2 Calculate tokens over 1 focus token. Now, yes, obviously there are situations. If you roll like 4 red dice and they all come up focus, you're probably going to wish you had a focus token over multiple Calculate tokens. But that is not super frequent. And when I have a look at the list here, we're not going to talk specifically about the whole list. I want to speak directly about the way Calculate's been used in these lists, and talk specifically about the maths behind that and how they affect the list that they're in. And we're going to start off with a couple of my patron lists here. This one's by Disemboweled, a truly gruesome screen name. And this list includes Dallin Oberos, 4-LOM, and Cavil. Dallin Oberos has Debris Gambit, Advanced Sensors, Stealth Device, and Virago. 4-LOM has Elusive, 000, Contraband, Cybernetics, and Mist Hunter. Cavil has Expert Handling, R4 Astromech, Han Solo Gunner, and the Ion Cannon Turret. And just before we get onto the droid stuff, I gotta say I do like this overall. Debris Gambit alongside Advanced Sensors on Dallin Oberos does feel like a very strong move. That way you could take a red evade and then do a green action, or you could take a white evade if you're next to an asteroid and then do a red action. Coupling that alongside his ability to change the ship's facing, you've got a lot of different flexibility there, and Virago just makes it more powerful overall. Stealth device is going to be frustrating for your opponent because you get to roll more green dice and he can get into really annoying situations. Cavill has a nice basic utility build. I really like this. Han Solo alongside R4 Astromech and Expert Handling really clean up all that red stressful maneuvers and actions, and you're giving yourself a bit more utility with Han Solo. Alongside the ion cannon turret, you're going to have a lot of flexibility to move that round, but you're still going to be able to modify your dice. Pretty solid. I like both of these lists. But let's talk about Forlom, because we have Forlom with 000, and I got to say I really like the thinking behind this. Apart from that, we have Contraband Cybernetics and Mist Hunter, which is a nice little combo as well. So you can still do your K turns and all the stressful maneuvers on this dial, of which there are quite a few, and then take a barrel roll, which could potentially get your ship into range 1 and help trigger Forlom's ability. That seems really, really solid. But the whole idea of this build is trying to get Forlom up close and personal. Apart from anything else, you'll be able to shed your stress and give it to your opponent. But also, if you use him as a blocker, this works as well. With 000, you get the ability to gain extra calculate tokens. And I think more often than not, your opponent's going to see this coming and they are going to go, okay, I'll give you calculate tokens rather than taking the extra stress and prevent them from being locked down. Or there's also the scenario where their ship is pretty stress agnostic. They don't mind getting more stress tokens, so they'll just take those. Just bear in mind, whenever we have the ability to give your opponent to choose one of two bad situations, they're always going to choose the thing that is least impactful on their ship, and that's not always a good thing. I will say that 000 is a nice, effectively costed card, and look, both of those things are good. I just feel like there is a bit of a risk that either calculate on your ship or stress on your opponent's ship is just not going to be impactful enough at the time. But what we can do here with Forlom is pressure your opponent by saying, okay, I can get more than one calculate token, or I can up the amount of stress tokens I put onto your ship, and that applies more pressure and makes this decision a bit harder, which is a great simple application of 000. Which brings us on to our next list by Kidney, another patron. We have 000 on a Jakku Gunrunner. This is flown alongside another Jakku Gunrunner without any upgrades, Boba Fett with IG-88D, Marauder and Han Solo Gunner, and Cavill with Trick Shot and Ion Cannon Turret. And before anything else, let's continue the conversation on 000, because this is also another very interesting application of him. Apart from anything else, yes, you can still block and do that kind of thing. I will say I do like to have the Informant on lists with Jakku Gunrunners because it makes their blocking a bit more potent. It makes their Space Tug Tractor Array a bit more effectual because you can force them to fly over rocks or something like that. Basically, the idea is you can look at their dial, you can space tug them into a bad situation, so they're going to bump into a ship or fly onto a rock or something like that. It's a very nasty combo. 000, instead of being a card that sort of helps set that up, is a card that helps capitalize off the Jakku Gunrunner. So Kidney, if you're watching, if you can think of a way to get Jakku Gunrunner, one of them with an Informant and one of them 000, I think that might be something worth looking at. But all in all, yes, forcing the bump is what these guys wants to do, and 000 can help capitalize off that. I will say though, I'm not as sold on this version of the 000 build as the last one with Forlom, because one of the options I feel here is consistently not going to be that powerful, and that's giving your ship a calculate token. I just don't feel like giving a calculate token to a Jakku Gunrunner is going to be that effectual most of the time. Sure, they might get some range 1 shots and improve their combat efficiency, but it's not really what the ship is trying to do most of the time. And from that point of view, I think this is a good cheap build, but I feel like 000 on Forlom is probably a bit more leaning into what it wants to do. Also in this build, talking about calculate tokens, we have IG-88D, and this opens up a very interesting conversation about the theoretical use of IG-88D. Now, IG-88D gives your ship the same pilot ability as a friendly ship equipped with the IG-2000 upgrade. Now, you can take him on a list like you have done here without a ship with the IG-2000, and in that instance, you are just giving your ship the ability to take 2 calculate tokens. As I said before, that is in general better than taking a single focus token, so I think that's actually not a bad idea. Just remember, Also, that you've got Han Solo on here. He doesn't actually work with IG-88D because he's specifically taking focus actions. Actually, just as an aside as well, I don't think taking Han Solo is actually wise here, because after you already have 2 calculate tokens, there's basically no value taking Han. And if you're only going to do one or the other, you're not getting value out of your upgrade card. So I'd actually have a look at taking something like a Slave 1 and Elusive or something like that. Just give Boba Fett a bit more utility overall, so you don't have upgrade cards that are sort of fighting with each other. But we're not going to talk about that in this video. We're talking mainly about IG-88D on Boba Fett as a hard and fast rule. And as a 4-point upgrade, I actually quite like him on Boba Fett. Perhaps even with nothing else, IG-88D is interesting because Boba Fett sees a lot of dice. He has 3 red dice shooting forwards or backwards, 2 green dice, and he gets rerolls. And from that point of view, having 2 ways to modify your focus results is actually very potent. He is very likely to see a focus result on both offense and defense. Now, you could also make the argument that he's likely to see more than one. I mean, maybe that's a situation where you'd want focus tokens more than calculate tokens. But if we're going to have a look at Hotshot Copilot, that card costs 10 points, and that is a significant point increase. You actually can't fit that in here alongside with the other upgrades you've taken. So from that point of view, I actually think IG-88D does have a case to make on Boba Fett. But let's put all that aside for a second and talk about something super synergistic between a lot of ships in your squad. Now, a few weeks ago, I had a look at this list by Curtis Lydiard with IG-88D, 4-LOM, and Guri, and we had a bit of a conversation during that video about potentially switching out 4-LOM for another ship that can take IG-88D, because functionally speaking, any ship with IG-88D is basically treated as a droid pilot because it has the calculate action, gets the extra tokens, and works very well with IG-88A. And this list here during the week was actually submitted by Mr. Erick Colon as well. This has IG-88A, Paylob Gildali, and Guri. During that last video as well, I did speak about using Paylob Gildali, and this application is a bit different from what I suggested, but I really like what's going on here. IG-88A only has the IG-2000 title, Paylob has Trick Shot, IG-88D, and Moldy Crow. Guri has Outmaneuver and Collision Detector. Now, I like Paylob a lot here because he has the Moldy Crow title. I think overall that is a very valuable thing to put in this list because it really helps unlock Paylob's ability. I think in the last time we had a look at this, we were talking about more upgrades on IG-88A, and I don't think that's necessary as a hard and fast rule. If you remember the old Paratani list from first edition, the IGs can work without a lot of upgrades as long as they're doing their job, their pilot ability is working. And I think that's a very similar strategy to what we're going on here. This isn't the same power level as a Paratani, but it's a similar kind of strategy. And with the power level adjustment moving in second edition, this looks pretty legit. Indeed, what you got to remember as well is IG-88A's ability gives Paylob Gildali also the ability to pass off his calculate tokens, and that means that Paylob's ability to steal green tokens, what is it, focus or evade tokens, is made a little bit more powerful because you can pass off those calculate tokens, but you still have green tokens left behind to make him a bit more combat efficient, which is fantastic. Alongside Guri being able to gain those free focus tokens, Outmaneuver seems pretty legit on Guri. Collision Detector is very interesting. I guess it makes a lot of sense because then Guri can use all her different abilities to get through rocks and all that kind of stuff. Also means you can do like S-loops over a rock and all that kind of stuff. Seems pretty legit. I will say Outmaneuver is an interesting choice. It's the kind of card that I think will do better the more and more you practice it. Perhaps if you're a newer player, you might favour other things like Lone Wolf or whatever. Lone Wolf's still pretty decent in a 3-ship build, especially on an ace. But a pretty solid choice nonetheless. Eric, if you've tried this out, please let me know how often Outmaneuver works. But ultimately, the core of this list is sharing around those calculate tokens, making sure that your ships are tokened up every combat in the right combination depending on who's shooting and who's defending, to make sure that you get the best dice results and you leverage that over your opponent. It's a really solid strategy, and I think out of all the like IG Guri combos, this is one we seriously have to look at. Now, another interesting combination which actually did not occur to me because I didn't really think that this was possible to field, but I made the comment when we were looking at the point structure when that was all revealed that Lando's Falcon seems to be very effectively costed. So much so that it seems that we can use this kind of strategy even with that platform. Which brings me on to a couple of lists that you commented submitted. This one's by Rolo, and this is L3's Droid Liberation Squad, and I really like the look of this. This has L3 in the Falcon, IG-88A, and 4 LOM. And because these are costed so effectively, or so aggressively anyway, you can actually get pretty decent loadouts on this. I'm actually quite surprised by this. L3 has a very, very flavorful build with both 000 BT-1 and Lando's Millennium Falcon. IG-88A has a rigged cargo chute. IG-2000, 4 LOM has Elusive Advanced Sensors, IG-88D, and Mist Hunter. That's a really decent loadout in 4 LOM in particular. The one flex slot I look at here is the rigged cargo chute in IG-88A. I guess if you're not really into using the rigged cargo chute, it might have much value, but it does help you capitalize off that stress control that the other two ships have. So it's definitely not filler by any stretch of the imagination. I gotta say, I really like getting 000 and BT-1 onto the same ship, especially a ship that cares about stress. Alongside two other ships that care about stress, it really feels like each of these ships are comboing off each other. Now that's going to suck if one of them dies and then the other two get less powerful, but look, that's how IGs have always run in first edition. I don't see how that's going to change much in second edition. You may have leaned into that a bit too much, and that might make this list a bit too vulnerable, but I don't care because I think the upside is just relevant enough. L337 can fly very aggressively, get into range 1, force stress onto your opponent, force more dice for her, get criticals off BT-1, seems really powerful. IG-88A is just a solid platform, and 4 LOM is doing everything 4 LOM wants to do. You've increased the combat effectiveness by using Elusive. Advanced Sensors means you can take those red maneuvers and still get actions, which is very relevant when you have IG-88D and you want double calculate. Mist Hunter's handy because you can do barrel rolls and decay turns and stuff with Advanced Sensors. Rolo, if you're watching, I think this is a very solid list. You've really leaned into the synergy quite nicely. And I'd love to hear how this flies, which is a slight variation. I actually just got this one submitted yesterday, so thank you to Mr. Hazivix for submitting this one. This one has Han Solo on the Falcon. IG-88A has the IG-2000 upgrade. 4 LOM has a seasoned navigator, another interesting way to capitalize off his ability. Han Solo has Trick Shot, IG-88D, Lando Calrissian, and Lando's Millennium Falcon. And while these guys aren't all necessarily working together as synergistically as the last one, I will say having Han Solo is good because you have a higher initiative pilot who can potentially punch a bit hard because of his ability. Plus, we have the lovely combo here, which another thing I never would have thought of, IG-88D alongside Lando Calrissian. That seems really, really good because you have 2 double rerolls on Han Solo on an Initiative 6 ship with Trickshot, Lando's Falcon. Yeah, again, it just seems to be very high value. Not as synergistic, but a bit more high value. And I think that's definitely something worth talking about. Now, as a result, we do need a bit of a lighter build on the other two platforms, so you've stuck Seasoned Navigator on 4 LOM. I don't know if that's necessarily the right call. Maybe you want to think about Elusive, Mist Hunter. We can't quite fit on Advanced Sensors, something like that, but there are definitely options for 4 LOM. Although I will say I don't think there's anything wrong with flying IG-88A with just the IG-2000 title. I think that's a very aggressively costed ship, especially considering the value you get out of IG-88D on Han Solo. I will say, talking about IG-88D, there is a case argument to put him on 4 LOM instead, because then we're feeding Han Solo directly. Han Solo doesn't really appeal to me as a ship that wants to be losing his calculate tokens because he has Lando on him. I feel like we're somewhat losing the first paragraph on IG-88D because of the way you've chosen to use him. But nevertheless, a really solid list. I really like the Lando crew card. I'm loving seeing all the different applications we're seeing him submitted, and this is no exception. Guys, thank you so much for submitting all those lists. In the meantime, if you want to submit any list for me to consider using in one of these videos, put it in the comment section down below, please, in block text form. Please don't post a link, they get filtered out by YouTube. And if you want to join the Discord server, please consider supporting the Patreon. And thank you as always to all my patrons. You guys are seriously helping the channel out, both monetarily and deciding the creative direction of the channel, which is always a very good thing. In the meantime, guys, thank you so much for watching. Like and subscribe, like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter, Reddit, consider supporting the Patreon, and I'll catch you guys later on.